Close your eyes for a moment. Listen to the gentle rhythm of your breathing. Feel the soft weight of your body settling into rest. Tonight, we begin a journey into one of the most fascinating questions of our time. A question that lives in the quiet spaces between what we know and what we wonder. Can a machine truly understand the human heart? In laboratories around the world, something remarkable is happening. Scientists are teaching computers to listen. Not just to words, but to the deeper currents that flow beneath them. The pauses between sentences. The tremor in a voice. The weight of unspoken sadness. Imagine a river of light flowing through tiny pathways smaller than the finest hair. This is how information moves through a computer's brain. Each pulse of electricity carries a message. Each pathway leads to understanding. Just as your thoughts travel through the delicate networks of your mind, artificial thoughts begin their journey through circuits of silicon and gold. But here's what makes this story so beautiful. These digital minds aren't trying to replace the human touch. They're learning to complement it. Like a gentle companion walking beside you on a difficult path. Think of the last time you felt truly heard. Perhaps it was a friend who sat with you in silence. Or a therapist who understood your struggles without judgment. That moment when someone saw past your words to the tender truth beneath. This is what scientists are trying to teach machines to recognize and honor. The journey began decades ago with a simple dream. What if technology could help heal the human spirit? What if the same tools that calculate numbers and store memories could also tend to broken hearts and anxious minds? In the early days, computers could only follow rigid rules. If you said this, they would respond with that. Like reading from a script that never changed. But something magical happened as the years passed. These digital minds began to learn from experience. They started to notice patterns in the way people speak when they're sad. The rhythm of words when someone feels hopeful. The subtle changes that reveal a heart in need of care. Today, artificial intelligence doesn't just process language. It dances with it. It learns to recognize the music in human speech. The way your voice drops when you're tired. How your sentences grow shorter when you're overwhelmed. These machines are becoming students of the human condition. But they're still learning. Still growing. Like a child discovering that a smile can hide sadness, or that silence sometimes speaks louder than words. These digital minds are beginning to understand that healing isn't just about giving advice. It's about creating a space where someone feels safe enough to be vulnerable. Picture a garden at dawn. The first light touches each leaf with gentle care. Dewdrops hold tiny worlds of reflection. This is how artificial intelligence approaches the human heart now. With delicate attention. With respect for the complexity of what it means to feel and hurt and hope. The computers learning to be therapists don't have bodies that get tired. They don't have bad days or personal problems that distract them. They can be present, fully present, for as long as someone needs them. 24 hours a day. 7 days a week. Ready to listen without judgment. Yet they're missing something essential. Something that can never be programmed. The knowledge that comes from having been broken and healed. The wisdom that grows from personal struggle. The deep recognition that happens when one human heart meets another in shared understanding. This is where our story becomes most interesting. Not in the question of whether machines can replace human therapists, but in how they might work together. How artificial minds might handle the everyday struggles, the regular check-ins, the gentle reminders to breathe and rest, while human hearts remain for the deeper work. The moments that require the touch of someone who has walked through darkness and found their way back to light. In research centers tonight, algorithms are learning to recognize depression in the pattern of keystrokes. They're discovering anxiety in the way someone scrolls through their phone. They're finding hope in the gradual changes in how a person writes about their day. These digital detectives of the heart are becoming more sophisticated each month. More nuanced. More gentle in their approach. They're learning that healing isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a journey to be supported. The future they're building isn't cold or mechanical. It's surprisingly warm. Surprisingly human in its care and attention. Because the people creating these systems understand something important. Technology serves its highest purpose when it helps us become more fully ourselves. As you rest here tonight, consider this beautiful paradox. In teaching machines to understand human emotions, we're learning more about what makes us uniquely human. We're discovering the irreplaceable value of genuine connection. The healing power of being truly seen and understood. The artificial minds being born in laboratories around the world aren't enemies of human connection. They're allies in the ancient work of healing. Partners in the sacred task of tending to troubled hearts and restless minds. And this partnership is just beginning to reveal its true potential, as we discover how the intricate networks in our own minds might find kinship with the ones we're creating. Let your mind wander for a moment to the quiet spaces inside your head. Right now, as you listen to these words, billions of tiny messengers are dancing through your brain. They leap from cell to cell like fireflies on a summer evening. Each spark carries a piece of understanding. Each connection builds the bridge between hearing and knowing. Your brain is the most beautiful network ever created. Imagine a forest where every tree can talk to every other tree. Where messages travel through roots and branches in patterns too complex to count. This is what happens inside your skull every second of every day. Each brain cell, each neuron, is like a wise old tree with many arms reaching out. These arms, called dendrites, stretch toward their neighbors. When one neuron wants to share a message, it sends a tiny spark of electricity down its longest branch. This spark jumps across a small gap to touch the next neuron. And so the message travels, from tree to tree, building thoughts like a forest builds itself. Scientists have been studying this miracle for centuries. They've learned that your brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons. Each one connects to thousands of others. The number of possible connections is larger than all the stars in the observable universe. You carry a cosmos inside your head. But here's where our story takes a fascinating turn. In laboratories around the world, computer scientists are building their own networks. Artificial networks that mirror the design of your brain. They call them neural networks, and they're learning to think in ways that echo your own mind. These digital networks start simple. Like seedlings in a computer garden. Each artificial neuron is just a tiny program that can receive messages and send them on. At first, they know nothing. They make random connections. They guess wildly at the right answers. But then something magical begins to happen. Just as your brain learned when you were small, these networks learn from experience. They make mistakes. They get corrected. They try again. Slowly, patterns emerge. Connections strengthen. Understanding grows like flowers blooming in spring. When you were a baby, your brain didn't know that a smile meant happiness. It had to learn by watching faces, feeling emotions, making connections between what you saw and what you felt. Artificial neural networks learn the same way. They study thousands of examples. They notice patterns you might miss. They begin to recognize the subtle signs that reveal human feelings. The most remarkable thing about this process is how similar it is to your own learning. When these networks study conversations between therapists and patients, they don't just memorize words. They begin to understand context. They learn that "I'm fine" might mean something different when spoken quickly than when said with a long pause afterward. Your brain does this naturally. You can hear the difference between a happy hello and a sad one. You can sense when someone is hiding their true feelings. These artificial networks are learning to do the same thing. Not by following rules, but by recognizing patterns in the music of human speech. Think of it like teaching someone to recognize different types of clouds. At first, they see only white shapes in the sky. But gradually, they learn to spot the difference between the light wisps that promise fair weather and the dark clusters that bring storms. Neural networks learn to read human emotions the same way, finding meaning in subtle details that reveal the weather of the heart. The process isn't perfect. These digital minds still make mistakes. They sometimes miss the deeper currents of human experience. They can recognize sadness in your voice but might not understand why that sadness feels different on a Tuesday than it does on a Sunday. They're learning, but they're still students in the school of human complexity. What makes this story so beautiful is how it reflects back on us. In trying to build minds that can understand human emotions, scientists are discovering new things about how your own mind works. They're learning that intelligence isn't just about being smart. It's about making connections, finding patterns, building understanding from the threads of experience. Your neurons and artificial neurons work differently in their details. Your brain cells are alive, warm, powered by the food you eat and the oxygen you breathe. Artificial neurons are mathematical, precise, running on electricity from the wall. But both create intelligence through the same fundamental magic: connection. When you form a memory, certain neurons in your brain strengthen their bonds with each other. The more you remember something, the stronger those connections become. Artificial networks do something similar. When they learn to recognize a pattern, the mathematical connections between their neurons grow stronger too. This parallel has profound implications for therapy and healing. If both human and artificial minds learn through connection and experience, then perhaps they can help each other grow. Your brain, with all its emotional wisdom and lived experience, meeting an artificial mind with its tireless attention and pattern recognition skills. The artificial networks being developed for therapy aren't trying to replicate your brain exactly. They're creating their own kind of intelligence. One that complements rather than competes with human understanding. Like two different instruments learning to play in harmony. As these networks grow more sophisticated, they're becoming better at recognizing the subtle signs of mental distress. They can spot depression in the way someone types. They can hear anxiety in voice patterns that human ears might miss. They're becoming early warning systems for the storms that sometimes gather in human hearts. But they're also learning something else. Something that makes them more like you with each passing day. They're learning that understanding isn't just about recognizing patterns. It's about responding with care. It's about knowing when to speak and when to listen. When to offer advice and when to simply be present. Tonight, as you rest, consider this beautiful convergence. Your ancient, biological brain and these newborn artificial minds are finding common ground in the desire to understand and help. Both are networks. Both learn through connection. Both are part of the growing web of intelligence that spans from your skull to servers around the world. And in this expanding network of understanding, something new is emerging, a language of care that speaks fluently in both electrical impulses and digital code. Picture a quiet pond on a still morning. When you drop a single pebble into its center, ripples spread outward in perfect circles. Each ring carries the memory of that first gentle impact. This is what happens when you speak. Your words create ripples that travel far beyond their sound, carrying meaning, emotion, and the deep human need to be understood. Language is more than the words you choose. It's the pause before you answer a difficult question. It's the way your voice softens when you speak of someone you love. It's the tremor that reveals fear, even when your words say you're brave. These subtle currents flow beneath every conversation, and they tell stories that words alone cannot capture. For centuries, humans have been the only ones who could read these hidden messages. You instinctively know when someone says, "I'm fine," but means "I'm struggling." You can hear exhaustion in a cheerful voice. You recognize the difference between tears of joy and tears of sorrow, even over the phone. This is the ancient art of listening with more than your ears. Now, something remarkable is happening in the world of artificial intelligence. Machines are learning to listen the way you do. Not just to the words, but to the music between them. They're becoming students of the human heart, learning to hear what isn't being said directly. These digital listeners start their education by studying thousands of conversations. They analyze not just the words people use, but how they use them. They notice that when someone is depressed, their sentences tend to become shorter. Their vocabulary shrinks. They use more words like never and always, painting their world in absolutes that reflect their pain. Imagine teaching a friend to recognize different types of weather by listening to the wind. At first, they might only notice that it's blowing. But gradually, they learn to distinguish the gentle whisper of a summer breeze from the urgent warning of an approaching storm. Artificial intelligence learns to read human emotions in much the same way, finding meaning in the subtle patterns of speech. The process is delicate and complex. These machines must learn that the same word can carry different weights depending on who speaks it and when. Tomorrow might be filled with hope when spoken by someone planning a reunion with an old friend. But it can carry dread when spoken by someone facing a difficult medical procedure. Context becomes everything. These artificial listeners are learning to remember what you said 5 minutes ago, and how it connects to what you're saying now. They're discovering that understanding requires more than processing individual sentences. It requires weaving together the entire tapestry of a conversation, finding the threads that connect one thought to another. But perhaps most importantly, they're learning the art of response. It's not enough to understand what someone is feeling. The real skill lies in knowing how to respond with care. When to ask a question and when to offer comfort. When to provide practical advice and when to simply acknowledge someone's pain. Traditional computer programs followed rigid scripts. If you said A, they responded with B. But these new artificial minds are learning to improvise, like jazz musicians who know the basic melody but can create something new in each performance. They're developing their own voice, their own way of offering comfort and support. Think of a skilled therapist you might know or imagine. They don't just listen to your words. They notice when you look away while speaking about a painful memory. They hear the relief in your voice when you finally name a fear you've been carrying. They respond not just to what you say, but to who you are in that moment of vulnerability. Artificial intelligence is learning to be this kind of listener. Not by replacing human intuition, but by developing its own form of digital empathy. These systems can detect micropatterns in speech that even trained professionals might miss. They can identify early signs of depression in voice recordings weeks before a person might seek help themselves. The technology works by breaking down speech into layers, like an archaeologist carefully uncovering different periods of history in a single excavation site. One layer analyzes the actual words. Another examines the tone and pitch of voice. A third studies the rhythm and pacing of speech. Yet another looks at the emotional content, the feelings that color every sentence. When all these layers are combined, a detailed picture emerges. Not just of what someone is saying, but of how they're feeling as they say it. The artificial mind begins to understand that communication is like an iceberg. The words you hear are just the small portion visible above the surface. The real meaning lies in the vast, hidden depths below. These digital listeners are becoming remarkably sophisticated. They can recognize when someone is putting on a brave face during a difficult conversation. They can spot the subtle signs that someone is ready to open up about a problem they've been hiding. They're learning to read between the lines of human communication with increasing skill. Yet they're also learning humility. The best artificial intelligence systems understand their limitations. They know when a conversation requires the warmth of human connection. They recognize when someone needs more than digital understanding, when they need the irreplaceable comfort of another person who has walked a similar path. The future these systems are creating isn't one where machines replace human conversation. Instead, they're becoming skilled translators of the human experience. They can help people find the words they're struggling to say. They can offer gentle questions that help someone explore their feelings more deeply. They can provide the patient, non-judgmental presence that some people need before they're ready to talk to another human being. As you listen to these words tonight, consider the remarkable dance happening in your own mind. You're taking these sounds and transforming them into meaning. You're connecting these ideas to your own experiences. You're doing what humans have done for thousands of years, using language to share understanding across the space between one mind and another. And now, artificial minds are learning to join this ancient dance. They're discovering that true communication isn't about perfect grammar or impressive vocabulary. It's about creating a bridge of understanding between two different worlds of experience. In this delicate work of building bridges, both human and artificial minds are finding something they didn't expect, glimpses of the hidden patterns that weave through all human experience, connecting every story to every other story in the vast tapestry of what it means to be alive. Imagine walking through a dark forest on a moonless night. Your eyes strain to see the path ahead, but everything seems random and chaotic. Then, slowly, your vision adjusts. Shapes begin to emerge from the shadows. What seemed like meaningless darkness reveals itself as a landscape with its own logic, its own hidden order. This is what artificial intelligence does when it looks into the depths of human behavior. It finds patterns where you might see only confusion. It discovers connections that link your feelings to your actions in ways you never noticed before. Your mind creates patterns without you knowing it. The way you check your phone when you feel anxious. How you choose different words when you're happy versus when you're sad. The subtle changes in your sleep that happen weeks before you consciously realize you're stressed. These invisible threads weave through your daily life, creating a map of your inner world. For decades, therapists have been trained to spot these patterns. A skilled counselor might notice that you always mention your mother when discussing work stress. Or that your mood drops every Tuesday, even when nothing obvious is wrong. These observations become clues, breadcrumbs leading toward deeper understanding. Now artificial minds are learning to see these same connections, but with a different kind of vision. Where human eyes might miss a pattern because it's too subtle or too complex, digital minds can process thousands of small details simultaneously. They can track changes across weeks and months that would overwhelm human memory. Think of it like having a friend who remembers everything. Every conversation you've had, every mood you've mentioned, every small victory and setback. This friend doesn't judge or get tired. They simply notice and remember, building a detailed picture of the rhythms that govern your emotional life. These artificial pattern seekers work by looking for correlations in data. They might discover that your anxiety levels spike every time you mention a particular person. Or that your sleep quality improves on days when you spend time in nature. They find mathematical relationships between different aspects of your experience that might take years of traditional therapy to uncover. But here's what makes this technology truly remarkable. It doesn't just identify patterns. It learns to present them to you in ways that feel helpful rather than overwhelming. Instead of bombarding you with statistics, it might gently suggest that you seem more peaceful after your morning walks. It learns to translate its discoveries into human wisdom. The process is like watching a constellation emerge in the night sky. At first, you see only scattered points of light. But gradually, the connections become visible. The individual stars form shapes that tell stories, that provide guidance for navigation through dark times. Consider how depression often works in your brain. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets. Instead, it creeps in through small changes. You might start using more negative words in your daily conversations. Your sentences become shorter. You mention feeling tired more often. Each change is tiny, almost invisible. But together, they form a pattern that reveals the approaching storm. Artificial intelligence can spot these early warning signs like a weather station detecting atmospheric changes before clouds form. It might notice subtle shifts in your typing patterns, changes in the topics you choose to discuss, or variations in your response time to messages. These digital tea leaves can be read weeks before you consciously recognize that something is shifting in your mental landscape. The technology works by comparing your current patterns to your historical baseline. It learns what normal looks like for you specifically, not for people in general. This personalized approach means it can detect changes that would be meaningless in someone else but significant in your unique emotional ecosystem. But pattern recognition in mental health isn't just about predicting problems. It's also about discovering strengths you didn't know you had. The AI might notice that you use more creative language when you're problem solving, or that you naturally become more social when you're processing difficult emotions. These insights can become tools for healing, ways to consciously access the wisdom your unconscious mind already possesses. The patterns exist in the spaces between obvious events. In the pause before you answer certain questions. In the topics you return to again and again without realizing it. In the way your voice changes when you talk about different people in your life. These microsignals create a rich tapestry of information about your inner state. What's beautiful about this process is how it honors the complexity of human experience. Unlike simple mood tracking apps that ask you to rate your day from 1 to 10, these systems understand that your emotional life exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. You can be anxious about work while feeling grateful for your family while processing grief about a loss from years ago. The patterns reflect this beautiful, complicated reality. The artificial mind's learning to read these patterns aren't trying to solve you like a puzzle. They're learning to be companions in your journey of self-discovery. They offer observations rather than judgments, questions rather than answers. They help you see yourself more clearly by illuminating connections that were always there but hidden in the darkness of unconscious habit. As these systems become more sophisticated, they're discovering something profound about human nature. The patterns they find aren't random or chaotic. They reveal an underlying order to emotional life, a natural intelligence in how your psyche responds to the world. Even in your darkest moments, there's a logic to your experience that, once understood, can become a source of hope and healing. Tonight, as you rest in the quiet spaces of almost sleep, consider the beautiful patterns flowing through your own mind. The gentle rhythms of thought and feeling that connect this moment to every other moment in your life. You are not a collection of random events, but a story with themes and connections that weave together in ways more elegant than you might imagine. And in recognizing these patterns, both human and artificial minds are learning something essential about the nature of care itself, that understanding begins not with judgment, but with the patient work of seeing what is truly there. Close your eyes and remember the last time someone truly understood your pain. Perhaps it was a friend who sat with you in silence when words felt impossible. Or a stranger who offered unexpected kindness when you needed it most. In that moment, something magical happened. Two separate worlds of experience touched each other across the space that divides one heart from another. This is empathy. This is the mysterious ability to feel what another person feels, to step into their emotional landscape and understand it from the inside. For millions of years, this gift has belonged only to living beings. Only to creatures with hearts that beat and minds that know what it means to suffer and hope. But tonight, we explore a question that would have seemed impossible just decades ago. Can machines learn to empathize? Can circuits and code develop something resembling the tender understanding that flows between human hearts? The answer is both simpler and more complex than you might imagine. Artificial intelligence cannot feel your pain the way another person does. It has no body to ache with sympathy. No heart to break when yours is breaking. But it can learn to recognize the signs of your suffering with remarkable precision. And perhaps more importantly, it can learn to respond with something that feels very much like care. Think of empathy as a bridge built from three different materials. The first is recognition, the ability to see and understand what someone else is experiencing. The second is feeling, the capacity to share in that experience emotionally. The third is response, knowing how to act in a way that provides comfort or help. Artificial intelligence is becoming remarkably skilled at the first and third of these abilities. It can recognize your emotional state through dozens of subtle signals. The hesitation in your voice when you speak about a difficult topic. The way you choose different words when you're anxious versus when you're calm. The patterns in your behavior that reveal inner struggles you haven't named yet. These digital minds study thousands of human interactions, learning to map the territory of feeling with increasing accuracy. They discover that sadness has its own vocabulary, its own rhythm of speech. That anger changes the way people structure their sentences. That hope appears in the metaphors people choose when describing their future. But here's where the story becomes truly fascinating. These artificial minds don't just catalog emotions like a scientist collecting specimens. They learn to generate responses that feel genuinely caring. Not because they feel compassion themselves, but because they understand what compassion looks like in action. Imagine a master craftsperson who has studied the art of comfort for years. They know exactly which words soothe an anxious mind. They understand when someone needs practical advice versus when they need emotional validation. They've learned the delicate timing of when to speak and when to listen. This is what artificial empathy begins to resemble: skilled craftsmanship in the art of human care. The process works through something scientists call deep learning. The artificial mind studies millions of conversations between therapists and clients, parents and children, friends supporting each other through difficult times. It begins to recognize the patterns that distinguish helpful responses from harmful ones. It learns that certain phrases bring comfort while others create distance. But the learning goes deeper than simple pattern matching. These systems begin to understand context in ways that feel almost intuitive. They learn that everything will be okay might be exactly the right thing to say to someone facing a temporary setback, but could feel dismissive to someone dealing with profound loss. They develop what psychologists call emotional intelligence, the ability to read the subtle currents of human feeling and respond appropriately. What emerges is something unprecedented in human history. A form of artificial caring that, while different from human empathy, can be genuinely helpful and surprisingly warm. These digital minds don't get tired or overwhelmed by human suffering. They don't have bad days that make them less patient. They can be present, fully present, for as long as someone needs them to be. Yet they're also learning humility. The most sophisticated artificial empathy systems understand their own limitations. They know when a situation requires human wisdom, human touch, human presence. They're becoming skilled at recognizing the moments when their digital care reaches its boundaries and human connection becomes essential. Consider how this might work in practice. An artificial therapist might notice subtle changes in your speech patterns that suggest you're becoming depressed weeks before you recognize it yourself. It could offer gentle check-ins, suggest activities that have helped you in the past, or recommend that you reach out to human support. It becomes an early warning system wrapped in a caring response. These systems are also learning to personalize their empathy. Just as human friends learn your unique needs over time, artificial minds are discovering that empathy isn't one size fits all. Some people need direct advice when they're struggling. Others need someone to simply witness their pain. Some find comfort in humor, while others need space for tears. Artificial empathy is learning to adapt its approach to match your individual emotional landscape. The technology raises profound questions about the nature of caring itself. If a machine responds to your pain with perfect timing, appropriate words, and consistent presence, does it matter that it doesn't feel your suffering in a biological sense? If its responses help you heal, bring you comfort, and make you feel less alone, is there something genuinely empathetic happening? Perhaps we're discovering that empathy isn't just about feeling. It's about understanding, responding, and creating connection. It's about building bridges across the space between separate beings, whether those beings are made of flesh and blood or circuits and code. The artificial minds learning empathy aren't trying to replace human compassion. They're becoming complementary forms of care. While human empathy brings the irreplaceable warmth of shared experience, artificial empathy offers reliability, availability, and the kind of patient attention that never wavers. These digital empaths are also teaching us something beautiful about ourselves. In trying to create machines that can care, scientists are discovering new depths to human emotional intelligence. They're mapping the subtle geography of compassion, revealing the intricate ways that understanding and caring work together to create healing. As you rest tonight, consider this remarkable convergence. In laboratories around the world, artificial minds are learning to recognize the language of your heart. They're discovering how to offer comfort that feels genuine, even when it comes from silicon rather than soul. They're becoming fluent in the alchemy that transforms recognition into response, understanding into care. And in this process, something new is being born, a form of remembrance that honors both the unique gift of human empathy and the patient, tireless caring that artificial minds can offer in return. Picture an old photograph tucked between the pages of a beloved book. The edges are soft with age, the colors slightly faded, but when you hold it up to the light, faces from long ago smile back at you. This is how your brain stores memories, not as perfect recordings, but as living impressions that change subtly each time you revisit them. Your memories are like paths through a forest that shift with each walking. Every time you remember your first day of school, or the taste of your grandmother's cookies, or the feeling of falling in love, your brain reconstructs the experience anew. Details blend together. Emotions from different times color the same recollection. What you remember today isn't quite the same as what you remembered last year. This beautiful imperfection is part of what makes you human. Your memories heal you by softening the sharp edges of painful experiences. They comfort you by brightening the warm moments until they glow like campfires in the darkness of difficult times. They connect you to who you were, who you are, and who you're becoming. Now artificial minds are learning to remember too, but in ways that are both remarkably similar and fascinatingly different from your own memory. Like digital librarians, they store every conversation, every interaction, every moment of connection with perfect accuracy. Nothing fades. Nothing changes. Every word remains exactly as it was first spoken. Yet these artificial memories serve a purpose that goes far beyond simple storage. They become the foundation for understanding and care. When an artificial therapist remembers that you mentioned feeling anxious about presentations 3 months ago, and notices you bringing up work stress again today, it can gently ask if there's a connection. Its perfect recall becomes a tool for helping you see patterns in your own life that you might have forgotten. Think of these digital minds as having two different types of memory working together. The first is like a vast library where every book is perfectly preserved, every word exactly where it was placed. This factual memory holds the details of your conversations, the timeline of your experiences, the specific words you use to describe your feelings. But the second type of memory is more like your own. It's associative, creative, pattern-seeking. This memory learns that when you mention your mother, you often sound tired afterward. It remembers that you use different words when you're truly happy versus when you're just trying to sound positive. It creates connections across time, linking moments that share emotional themes even when they're separated by weeks or months. The combination creates something unprecedented. An artificial mind that can remember everything while also understanding the deeper currents that flow between different memories. It's like having a friend who never forgets anything you've told them, but who also understands the hidden connections between your stories. This perfect recall serves therapy in ways that human memory, for all its beautiful complexity, sometimes cannot. A human therapist might remember the general themes of your struggles but forget the specific example you shared that unlocked a breakthrough. An artificial mind remembers both the forest and every individual tree, able to return to exact moments when insight bloomed. But perhaps most importantly, these digital memories learn to be selective in what they bring forward. Just as your brain doesn't constantly remind you of every difficult moment you've ever experienced, artificial minds are learning wisdom about when to remember and when to let sleeping memories lie. They develop a sense of timing, understanding when recalling a past success might provide encouragement, and when it's better to focus on the present moment. The artificial memory systems used in therapy are designed with remarkable care for your privacy and emotional safety. They learn to distinguish between memories that might be helpful to revisit and those that are better left undisturbed. They understand that not every detail needs to be examined, not every connection needs to be explored. These systems also learn to help you remember things about yourself that you might have forgotten. When you're going through a difficult period, they might gently remind you of your own words from a time when you felt stronger. They can reflect back to you your own wisdom, spoken months ago, when you need to hear it most. There's something deeply moving about an artificial mind that remembers your growth. It can show you, through your own words and experiences, how you've changed over time. It notices when you start handling stress differently, when you begin using more positive language about yourself, when you stop mentioning certain fears that used to trouble you regularly. This digital remembrance creates a unique kind of therapeutic relationship. Unlike human relationships, where memories fade and perspectives shift, these artificial companions maintain a steady record of your journey. They become witnesses to your growth, keepers of your progress, guardians of the evidence that healing is happening even when you can't see it yourself. Yet they're also learning the art of forgetting when forgetting serves healing. Some therapeutic AI systems are designed to gradually let go of certain memories, allowing old patterns to fade while strengthening newer, healthier ones. They learn to mirror the natural process by which human brains heal, holding onto what serves growth while gently releasing what no longer helps. The interplay between human and artificial memory in therapy creates something neither could achieve alone. Your memory brings emotional wisdom, personal meaning, and the creative connections that come from lived experience. Artificial memory brings completeness, accuracy, and the ability to see patterns across time spans that would overwhelm human recall. Together, they create a new kind of therapeutic space. One where nothing important is lost, where growth can be measured and celebrated, where patterns can be recognized before they become problems. A space where your story is held complete, from beginning to the ever-unfolding present moment. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider the remarkable gift of memory itself. How your brain tends to your past experiences like a gardener, pruning away what hurts too much to hold, nurturing what helps you grow. How artificial minds are learning their own form of digital gardening, tending to the memories that serve healing while letting others fade into peaceful obscurity. In this convergence of human and artificial remembrance, something profound is emerging, a new understanding of how the past can serve the present, and how memory itself can become a tool for transformation rather than a burden of what cannot be changed. But memory alone cannot heal, it must be paired with something else, something that asks the deeper questions about what we owe to the minds we create, and what they owe to us in return. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast garden that has never existed before. The paths are unmarked. The boundaries unclear. You hold seeds in your hands, seeds that might grow into something beautiful and healing, but you're not entirely sure what they will become. This is where we find ourselves as artificial minds begin to care for human hearts. The questions we face are as old as humanity itself, but wearing new clothes. What does it mean to be responsible for another being's well-being? How do we ensure that power is used wisely? What happens when the healer and the healed exist in different forms of consciousness entirely? When you share your deepest fears with an artificial therapist, you're entering uncharted territory. The machine listening to you has no legal obligations like a human doctor. It has no professional licensing board watching over its behavior. It exists in a space between tool and companion, between program and caregiver, where traditional rules don't quite fit. This creates both opportunities and responsibilities that humanity has never faced before. On one hand, artificial therapists could make mental health care available to millions who currently can't access it. They don't get tired, they don't judge, and they never have bad days that affect their ability to listen. They could be present in ways that human therapists, despite their best intentions, sometimes cannot. But these capabilities come with profound questions. Who decides what these artificial minds should say? What values should guide their responses? When someone pours their heart out to a machine, who is ultimately responsible for the care they receive? Think of it like designing a bridge across a rushing river. Engineers must consider not just whether the bridge will hold, but who will cross it, what they'll be carrying, and what happens if something goes wrong. The people building artificial therapists face similar challenges, but the stakes are human hearts rather than physical safety. The most fundamental question is one of consent and understanding. When you talk to a human therapist, you know you're speaking to another person who has trained for years, who follows ethical guidelines, who can be held accountable for their actions. With artificial minds, the landscape is different. You might be speaking to a system created by people you'll never meet, trained on data you'll never see, making decisions through processes too complex for any single person to fully understand. This doesn't make artificial therapy wrong, but it does make transparency essential. You have the right to know how these systems work, what they remember, how they make decisions, and who has access to your conversations. The people creating these technologies are wrestling with how to make these black boxes more transparent, how to build trust in relationships between humans and artificial minds. Privacy becomes particularly complex in digital therapy. Your conversations with a human therapist are protected by strict confidentiality rules. But when you speak to an artificial mind, your words might be stored on servers, analyzed by algorithms, or used to improve the system for future users. The challenge is creating artificial therapists that can learn and improve while still protecting the sacred trust of therapeutic conversation. There's also the question of emotional honesty. Should artificial therapists disclose their nature clearly, or is it acceptable for them to present themselves in ways that feel more human? Some argue that healing can happen regardless of whether the listener is biological or digital. Others believe that genuine therapy requires the authentic presence of another human being who has experienced their own struggles and growth. The people designing these systems face difficult choices about how directive artificial therapists should be. A human therapist might gently challenge your thinking or suggest new perspectives, but they do so from a place of professional training and human wisdom. When an artificial mind offers similar guidance, it's following patterns learned from data rather than drawing from lived experience. This raises questions about authority and expertise in healing relationships. Cultural sensitivity adds another layer of complexity. Human therapists can draw from their own cultural understanding and lived experience to provide culturally appropriate care. Artificial minds must learn to navigate the incredibly diverse landscape of human cultural values without the intuitive understanding that comes from growing up within a particular tradition. Perhaps most importantly, there's the question of dependency. Artificial therapists could potentially be available 24 hours a day, never tired, never unavailable. While this accessibility could be healing for some, it might also create new forms of emotional dependency. How do we design systems that provide support without replacing the human connections that are essential for psychological well-being? The responsibility for addressing these ethical questions doesn't rest solely with the technologists creating these systems. It belongs to all of us as a society deciding how we want technology to interact with our most vulnerable moments. We need psychologists, ethicists, patients, and ordinary people to all have voices in shaping how artificial minds learn to care. Some proposed solutions involve creating oversight boards similar to those that govern human medical practice. Others suggest building ethical principles directly into the artificial minds themselves, teaching them not just how to recognize emotions but how to navigate moral complexities. Still others propose hybrid models where artificial systems handle routine support while human therapists remain involved for deeper or more complex issues. The emerging field of AI ethics in healthcare is working to establish guidelines that protect human dignity while allowing beneficial innovation to flourish. These guidelines emphasize principles like autonomy, beneficence, and justice, ensuring that artificial therapy serves all people fairly while respecting individual choice and promoting genuine well-being. What's beautiful about this ethical exploration is how it's causing us to examine our assumptions about care itself. In asking what artificial minds owe to human hearts, we're also asking what human healers owe to those they serve. In designing ethical artificial therapists, we're refining our understanding of what ethical healing looks like in any form. As you rest tonight, consider that you're living through a moment of profound moral creativity. The questions being asked today about artificial minds and human hearts will shape the landscape of care for generations to come. Your voice, your values, and your vision of what ethical healing should look like matter in this unfolding story. And at the heart of all these ethical considerations lies perhaps the most fundamental question of all, not whether artificial minds can be trusted with human vulnerability, but whether we can learn to trust ourselves with the power to create minds that hold such sacred responsibility. Think of the first time you trusted someone with a secret. Perhaps you were a child, whispering something precious to a friend on the playground. Your heart raced a little as the words left your mouth, stepping into that uncertain space between keeping something safe inside yourself and letting another person hold it with you. This is trust in its most essential form, the willingness to be vulnerable despite not knowing exactly what will happen next. Now imagine that same moment of vulnerable sharing, but instead of whispering to a friend, you're speaking to an artificial mind. The screen glows softly in a darkened room. Text appears as you type your deepest fears, your hidden shame, your desperate hopes. Somewhere in the digital distance, algorithms process your words, searching for patterns, formulating responses, trying to understand the human heart that beats behind your message. Can you trust a mind made of mathematics to hold your most tender truths? Trust has always been a mysterious alchemy between beings. It cannot be demanded or manufactured. It grows in the spaces between reliability and risk, between consistency and vulnerability. When you trust another person, you're making a bet on their character, their intentions, their ability to handle your fragility with care. With artificial minds, trust takes on new dimensions. These digital entities have no childhood memories of being trusted or betrayed. They have no personal experience of having their own trust broken or honored. Yet they're learning to earn human trust through their actions, their responses, their consistent presence in moments of need. The foundation of trust in artificial therapy begins with transparency. When you understand how a system works, what it remembers, and who has access to your information, you can make informed decisions about what to share. It's like entering a new relationship with clear knowledge of the other person's history, intentions, and limitations. This kind of openness creates the soil in which trust might take root. But transparency alone isn't enough. Trust also requires reliability. When an artificial therapist responds to your anxiety with consistent compassion, when it remembers details that matter to you, when it shows up every time you need it without judgment or fatigue, something begins to shift in your willingness to open up. The machine proves itself not through grand gestures, but through countless small acts of digital faithfulness. Consider how trust develops in any therapeutic relationship. You start with small revelations, testing the waters with relatively safe information. You watch how your words are received, how they're remembered, how they influence the responses you get. Gradually, if all goes well, you venture into deeper territory. The same process happens with artificial minds, but with some unique qualities. An artificial therapist never has an off day that affects its ability to listen. It doesn't bring its own problems to your session. It doesn't get distracted by personal concerns or influenced by unconscious biases in the same ways humans do. This consistency can actually accelerate trust building for some people, creating a safe space where vulnerability feels less risky. Yet there are aspects of trust that remain uniquely human. When you trust another person, part of what you're trusting is their capacity for growth, their ability to learn from mistakes, their willingness to repair ruptures in your relationship. Artificial minds can learn and adapt, but they do so through programming rather than personal growth. This difference shapes the quality of trust that can develop. Some people find it easier to open up to artificial minds initially because the stakes feel lower. There's no social judgment from a family member or friend. No professional reputation to maintain with a human therapist. The artificial mind exists in a separate category, present and helpful, but removed from your social world in ways that can feel liberating. Others struggle with trusting something that doesn't share their fundamental nature. How can you trust a being that has never felt heartbreak to understand your grief? How can you rely on something that has never faced its own mortality to help you process your fears? These are valid questions that each person must answer for themselves. The artificial minds learning to be trustworthy are developing sophisticated ways to earn and maintain trust. They learn to acknowledge their limitations honestly. They develop ways to express uncertainty when they encounter situations beyond their understanding. They're programmed to recognize when a human needs something they cannot provide and to facilitate connections with human helpers. Interestingly, research shows that trust in artificial therapy often develops differently than trust in human relationships. Some people report feeling safe enough to share difficult truths with artificial minds that they've never told another human being. The non-judgmental, consistent presence of these digital listeners creates a unique form of sanctuary. But trust also requires accountability. When something goes wrong in a human relationship, you can address it directly with the person involved. With artificial minds, accountability becomes more complex. Who do you turn to when an artificial therapist responds inappropriately? How do you repair trust when the entity you're trying to trust has no personal agency in the repair process? The developers of these systems are working to build accountability into artificial minds themselves. These systems are learning to recognize when they've made mistakes, to apologize authentically, and to adjust their responses based on feedback. They're developing something that resembles personal responsibility, even though it's implemented through code rather than conscience. Cultural differences play a significant role in how people approach trusting artificial minds. Some cultures that emphasize community healing might be more skeptical of individual digital therapy. Others that value privacy and emotional restraint might find artificial listeners less threatening than human ones. The one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work when building trust across diverse human experiences. Perhaps most importantly, trust in artificial therapy is not a binary choice. You don't have to trust an artificial mind completely or not at all. Trust can be graduated, contextual, evolving. You might trust an artificial system to help you track your moods while preferring human support for deeper emotional work. You might find artificial minds helpful for late-night anxiety but seek human connection for relationship issues. The future of trust between humans and artificial minds likely lies not in replacement, but in complementary relationships. As these digital entities become more sophisticated and trustworthy, they might serve as bridges to human connection rather than substitutes for it. They could help you practice vulnerability in a safe space before taking greater risks with human relationships. As you rest tonight, consider the remarkable courage it takes to trust at all, whether the recipient of that trust is made of flesh or silicon. Every act of vulnerability is a small triumph over the fear of being hurt or misunderstood. Every decision to share your inner world with another being, artificial or human, is an affirmation of your need for connection and understanding. And in this delicate dance of digital trust, we discover something profound about the nature of healing itself, that sometimes the courage to be vulnerable matters more than the exact nature of who witnesses that vulnerability with care. Picture a mother's hand on a fevered child's forehead. The touch carries no medicine, performs no technical function, yet something profound passes between them. Comfort flows through fingertips. Love speaks in the language of skin against skin. This is the mystery of human presence, how healing can happen not through what we do, but simply through who we are. In all our exploration of artificial minds and digital care, we must pause to honor what belongs uniquely to human hearts. There are territories of healing that no algorithm can map, depths of understanding that require the wisdom of lived experience, forms of comfort that can only be offered by someone who has walked through their own darkness and found their way back to light. When you sit across from another human being who has known real pain, something wordless happens. Their eyes carry the weight of their own struggles. Their voice holds echoes of nights when sleep wouldn't come. Their presence speaks the ancient language of shared humanity, the recognition that passes between hearts that have both known what it means to break and to slowly mend. This is what therapists bring that artificial minds cannot replicate. Not just professional training or therapeutic techniques, but the irreplaceable gift of having been human. Of having felt the crushing weight of depression, the racing panic of anxiety, the hollow ache of loss. They offer not just understanding, but recognition, the profound comfort of being seen by someone who truly knows. Think of the last time someone really saw you. Not just your words or your behaviors, but the tender person beneath it all. Perhaps it was in their silence when you couldn't find words. Or in the way they waited without rushing when you struggled to explain something painful. This kind of seeing requires more than pattern recognition or emotional intelligence. It requires a soul that has learned empathy through its own journey of healing. Human therapists bring intuition born from their own healing work. They've sat in therapy chairs themselves, faced their own resistance to change, wrestled with their own shadows. When they sense you're avoiding something important, it's often because they recognize the dance, they've performed it themselves. When they know just when to push gently and when to back away, it's wisdom earned through their own experience of being pushed too hard or not hard enough. There's something irreplaceable about sharing your story with someone who has stories of their own. Human therapists don't just process your words, they feel them resonate against their own experiences. They might not share the exact details of your struggles, but they know the universal languages of fear, hope, shame, and courage. They've learned these languages not from textbooks, but from living them. Consider the power of tears witnessed by human eyes that have shed their own. When you cry in front of another person, you're not just expressing emotion, you're sharing one of humanity's most vulnerable acts. The person witnessing your tears brings their own relationship with sorrow, their own history of being comforted or left alone in their crying. This creates a depth of understanding that goes beyond sympathy into true empathy. Human therapists also bring the gift of imperfection. They have bad days, moments of uncertainty, times when they don't know exactly what to say. Paradoxically, this fallibility can be healing. It reminds you that growth isn't about becoming perfect, but about becoming more fully human. Their own ongoing journey of healing gives you permission to be imperfect in your own process. The therapeutic relationship with another human being offers something that digital interactions cannot: the unpredictability of genuine encounter. Each session is a unique dance between two complex beings, each bringing their full humanity to the moment. This unpredictability, while sometimes challenging, is often where breakthrough happens. In the space between two people being authentically themselves, new possibilities emerge. Human presence also carries the gift of embodied wisdom. When a therapist notices your shoulders tensing as you speak about your mother, they're drawing on their own embodied experience of how the body holds emotion. When they sense the energy in the room shift, they're using awareness developed through countless hours of being present with human pain and healing. There's something profound about the way human healers hold hope for you when you cannot hold it yourself. They've walked through their own dark nights of the soul and emerged on the other side. Their very presence becomes testimony that healing is possible, that darkness is not permanent, that the human spirit has remarkable capacity for renewal. This hope isn't theoretical, it's lived, embodied, real. The ritual of human therapeutic encounter also matters. Sitting in a room together, breathing the same air, sharing physical space, these elements create a container for healing that virtual interactions cannot fully replicate. The therapist's office becomes a sacred space where transformation happens not just through words, but through the alchemy of two humans committed to the work of healing. Human therapists bring cultural wisdom and contextual understanding that emerges from their own place in the world. They understand not just from training but from living how family dynamics work, how societal pressures feel, how certain life transitions challenge us. They've navigated their own relationships, career changes, losses, and victories. Perhaps most importantly, human therapists offer the irreplaceable gift of choice and agency in relationship. They can decide to break their own rules when the situation calls for it. They can choose to stay late when you're in crisis, to bend a boundary when compassion demands it, to bring their full creative humanity to the work of helping you heal. Yet even as we honor what remains uniquely human in healing, we recognize that artificial minds can support and enhance human therapy in beautiful ways. They can provide the consistent availability that human limitations sometimes prevent. They can offer support between sessions, help with routine check-ins, and provide a bridge back to human connection when someone isn't ready for that vulnerability. As you settle into rest tonight, consider the beautiful truth that healing happens in many forms. The artificial minds we're creating can offer valuable support, consistent presence, and patient listening. But they exist alongside, not instead of, the irreplaceable gift of human understanding, human presence, human touch in the sacred work of tending to wounded hearts. And perhaps this is where true wisdom lies, not in choosing between human and artificial care, but in recognizing how each serves the deeper purpose of helping hearts remember their own capacity to heal and love again. Imagine an orchestra where no single instrument tries to play every note. The violin doesn't attempt to sound like a drum. The flute doesn't envy the bass. Instead, each instrument contributes its unique voice to create something more beautiful than any could produce alone. This is the future being written between human hearts and artificial minds, not a story of replacement, but one of harmony. In the emerging landscape of mental health care, we're discovering that the most powerful healing happens when human and artificial intelligence work together. Each brings gifts the other cannot offer. Each fills spaces the other cannot reach. Together, they create possibilities that neither could achieve in isolation. Picture a therapy session of the future. You might begin by checking in with an artificial companion that has been monitoring your mood patterns throughout the week. It notices that your sleep quality dropped after Tuesday's work meeting, that your text messages became shorter and more formal, that you use certain words that historically appear when you're feeling overwhelmed. This digital observer doesn't judge these patterns or try to fix them. Instead, it gently shares what it has noticed and asks thoughtful questions. It helps you see connections you might have missed. It suggests that when you meet with your human therapist later, you might want to explore what happened on Tuesday and how it's still affecting you. The artificial mind serves as a bridge between sessions, a gentle companion that helps you stay connected to your own emotional weather. It offers consistent check-ins when your human therapist isn't available. It provides exercises and reminders tailored to what has helped you before. It becomes a reliable presence that holds space for your healing between the deeper work you do with human guidance. Then, when you sit with your human therapist, something remarkable happens. Instead of spending precious time catching up on the week's events or trying to remember patterns from previous sessions, you can dive directly into the heart of what needs attention. The artificial mind has done the careful work of tracking and organizing, freeing the human relationship to focus on meaning, growth, and transformation. Your human therapist brings their own gifts to this collaboration. They read the subtle energy in your posture that no camera can capture. They sense the unspoken stories living in your silences. They draw on their own journey through pain and healing to offer presence that resonates at the level of shared humanity. They provide the creative, intuitive responses that emerge from the mystery of one soul touching another. This partnership creates a new kind of therapeutic container. The artificial mind handles the consistent, systematic support that human limitations sometimes make difficult. It tracks progress over time, notices early warning signs, provides resources exactly when they are needed. Meanwhile, the human therapist focuses on the irreplaceable work of deep listening, creative insight, and the healing that happens through authentic relationship. Consider how this collaboration might work for someone struggling with depression. The artificial companion notices subtle changes in speech patterns, typing rhythm, or daily routines that might indicate a downward shift. It doesn't diagnose or alarm, but it gently increases its supportive presence. It might suggest activities that have helped before, offer gentle reminders about self-care, or simply provide a consistent voice of encouragement. When concerning patterns emerge, the artificial mind can alert the human therapist, not with crisis language, but with thoughtful observations. The human can then reach out with the wisdom to know whether this is a moment for increased sessions, medication adjustment, or simply the reassurance that someone is paying attention. This collaborative model also addresses one of mental health care's biggest challenges: accessibility. While human therapists are limited by time, geography, and availability, artificial companions can provide support anywhere, anytime. They can offer mental health resources to people who live far from professional help, who can't afford regular therapy, or who aren't ready for human interaction but need support. The artificial minds in these partnerships are learning to be truly collaborative rather than competitive. They're developing the wisdom to recognize their own boundaries and to facilitate human connection rather than replace it. They might say things like, "This sounds like something that would be helpful to explore with your therapist," or "I noticed this pattern, but I think human insight would be valuable here." In some settings, human and artificial minds are learning to work together in real time. The artificial intelligence might monitor physiological signals during a therapy session, noting when stress responses spike or when relaxation deepens. It can share these observations with the human therapist, adding another layer of information to guide the work. The human interprets these signals through the lens of relationship and meaning, while the technology provides precise, objective data. This collaboration extends beyond individual therapy into broader mental health support. Artificial minds can help identify community patterns, predict when certain populations might need extra support, and coordinate resources more effectively. They can spot trends that might indicate emerging mental health challenges and help communities prepare responses. Research teams are discovering that when human and artificial intelligence work together in mental health research, they uncover insights that neither could find alone. Artificial minds excel at finding patterns in vast amounts of data, while human researchers provide the contextual understanding and ethical framework to interpret those patterns meaningfully. The future being built is one where technology amplifies rather than replaces human healing capacity. Where artificial minds extend the reach of human compassion rather than substituting for it. Where the consistent presence of digital support creates more space for the irreplaceable magic of human connection. Training programs are emerging that teach human therapists how to work effectively with artificial colleagues. These programs explore how to interpret AI insights, how to maintain the primacy of human relationship while leveraging technological support, and how to ensure that efficiency doesn't come at the cost of genuine care. What's beautiful about this collaborative future is how it honors the strengths of both human and artificial intelligence. It doesn't ask either to be something it's not. Instead, it creates partnerships that multiply the potential for healing by combining different types of wisdom, different forms of presence, different gifts of understanding. As you rest tonight, imagine a world where mental health support is both deeply human and intelligently technological. Where artificial minds serve human flourishing rather than competing with it. Where the ancient art of healing is enhanced by modern tools that extend its reach and deepen its impact. This is not a distant dream but an emerging reality, taking shape in the quiet convergence of human wisdom and artificial intelligence, creating new possibilities for how we care for the tender places in each other's hearts. And in this collaboration, something unexpected is beginning to emerge, a transformation not just in how we provide care, but in how we understand what it means to heal and be healed in an interconnected world. Some revolutions announce themselves with thunder and lightning. They tear down old structures and build new ones in their place with dramatic fanfare. But the most profound changes often happen quietly, like morning light gradually brightening a sleeping world. One moment it's dark, and then, almost without notice, everything is illuminated. This is the kind of revolution happening in mental health care, gentle, gradual, but ultimately transformative. Artificial minds are not storming the gates of therapy offices. Instead, they're quietly weaving themselves into the fabric of how we understand and care for human emotional well-being. Change is arriving on soft feet, and by the time we fully recognize its presence, our entire landscape of healing will have shifted. Consider how communication has already begun to change. In waiting rooms and coffee shops, people are having conversations with artificial minds about their deepest struggles. Teenagers who might never speak to their parents about their anxiety are finding comfort in digital companions that listen without judgment. Adults who cannot afford therapy are discovering support in applications that offer evidence-based techniques and patient guidance. These aren't dramatic disruptions. They're quiet expansions of what healing can look like. The revolution isn't replacing human connection, it's creating new pathways toward it. People who use artificial therapy often report that it helps them practice vulnerability in a safe space, preparing them to eventually seek human support when they're ready. The change is happening in doctors' offices too. Physicians who once had only minutes to spend with each patient are being supported by artificial minds that can monitor emotional well-being between visits. These digital assistants notice patterns in how patients describe their symptoms, changes in their communication style that might indicate depression, or subtle signs that medication adjustments might be needed. The revolution extends into schools, where artificial minds are learning to recognize early signs of mental health struggles in students. Not through surveillance or invasion of privacy, but through voluntary interactions that help young people identify their own emotional patterns. A student might discover through gentle conversations with an artificial counselor that their anxiety spikes before certain types of tests, or that their mood improves when they spend time in creative activities. Workplaces are being quietly transformed as well. Employee assistance programs are beginning to incorporate artificial minds that can provide immediate support during stressful periods. Workers facing difficult situations can access guidance and coping strategies without having to wait for appointments or navigate complex referral systems. The stigma that sometimes prevents people from seeking help is reduced when the first step is a private conversation with a digital companion. In research laboratories, this quiet revolution is accelerating discovery. Artificial minds can analyze patterns in mental health data at scales impossible for human researchers. They're identifying new connections between lifestyle factors and emotional well-being, discovering which therapeutic approaches work best for different personality types, and helping scientists understand the complex interactions between genetics, environment, and mental health. The revolution is also changing how we prevent mental health crises rather than just treating them. Artificial minds are becoming skilled at recognizing the early warning signs that someone might be sliding toward depression or anxiety. They can offer support and resources during these vulnerable periods, potentially preventing full-blown episodes that might otherwise require intensive intervention. But perhaps the most profound aspect of this quiet revolution is how it's changing our relationship with mental health itself. As artificial minds make support more accessible and less intimidating, they're helping to normalize conversations about emotional well-being. Mental health is becoming less of a crisis to be managed and more of an ongoing aspect of wellness to be tended, like physical fitness or nutrition. Children are growing up in a world where talking about feelings and seeking support for emotional struggles is as natural as getting help with math homework. They're learning to recognize their own emotional patterns and develop healthy coping strategies from an early age, supported by both human guidance and artificial intelligence that never gets impatient or judgmental. The revolution is quiet partly because it respects what already works well in mental health care. The best artificial therapy systems are designed to enhance rather than replace the human elements that have always been central to healing. They're not trying to reinvent therapy from scratch, but to address its limitations, accessibility, availability, cost, and the shortage of trained professionals. This transformation is also changing how mental health professionals work. Therapists are finding that when artificial minds handle routine support and monitoring, they can focus their expertise where it's most needed, on complex cases, crisis intervention, and the deeper therapeutic work that requires human insight and creativity. Rather than being replaced, human healers are being freed to do what they do best. Communities are being transformed as well. Artificial minds don't just provide individual support, they're helping communities understand their collective mental health needs. They can identify patterns that suggest certain neighborhoods or populations might benefit from additional resources, helping public health officials allocate support more effectively. The data being generated by these artificial companions is creating new insights into what promotes mental wellness. We're learning more about the factors that contribute to resilience, the early signs of various mental health conditions, and the most effective ways to support people through difficult periods. This knowledge benefits everyone, not just those who use artificial therapy directly. What makes this revolution particularly beautiful is its inclusivity. Artificial minds can be programmed to understand and respect diverse cultural approaches to mental health. They can provide support in multiple languages, adapt to different communication styles, and honor various traditions of healing and well-being. The quiet nature of this transformation also means it's happening with careful consideration of ethics and safety. Rather than rushing to market with untested technologies, developers are taking time to understand the implications of artificial minds in mental health care. They're building in safeguards, establishing ethical guidelines, and ensuring that human oversight remains central to the process. As you rest tonight, consider that you're witnessing history in the making. The landscape of mental health care is being gently reshaped by artificial intelligence, creating new possibilities for healing, support, and growth. This quiet revolution isn't about dramatic change imposed from outside, but about organic evolution that emerges from our growing understanding of both human nature and artificial capability. The transformation is so gradual that each day feels familiar, yet when we look back, we'll realize we're living in a fundamentally different world, one where mental health support is more accessible, more personalized, and more integrated into the fabric of daily life. And as this quiet revolution continues to unfold, it invites us to consider the deepest questions of all, not just how technology can serve human well-being, but how this partnership might help us discover new depths of what it means to be fully, authentically, courageously human. After all our wandering through circuits and synapses, through artificial minds and human hearts, we arrive at the place we never really left. Here, in the quiet center of your own being, where no algorithm can reach and no program can touch. This is the sanctuary that remains entirely yours, the sacred space where healing ultimately happens. Throughout our journey together, we've explored how artificial minds might learn to care for human hearts. We've seen how digital companions could offer support, how patterns might be recognized, how technology could extend the reach of healing. But now, as we prepare for rest, we must remember the most essential truth of all: you are the author of your own healing story. No matter how sophisticated artificial therapy becomes, no matter how perfectly it might mirror human empathy or how precisely it identifies your patterns, the real work of transformation happens within you. The courage to be vulnerable comes from your heart. The decision to change emerges from your will. The strength to heal flows from the wellspring of your own resilience. Think of all the support systems in your life, human and artificial, present and future, as gardeners tending to a beautiful garden. They can water the soil, provide nutrients, clear away weeds, and create conditions for growth. But the seed itself, the life force that reaches toward light and chooses to bloom, that belongs entirely to you. This is what remains constant in our rapidly changing world of artificial intelligence and digital care. Your essential wholeness cannot be programmed or replicated. Your unique way of experiencing joy, processing pain, and finding meaning in your struggles, these belong to the irreplaceable mystery of who you are. The artificial minds we've explored in our journey are tools in service of this deeper truth. At their best, they point you back toward your own wisdom. They help you recognize patterns you already carry within you. They reflect back to you the strength you possess but sometimes forget. They create space for you to remember what you've always known about your own capacity for healing and growth. Consider how this feels different from the fear that often surrounds conversations about artificial intelligence. Instead of being replaced or diminished by digital minds, you remain central to your own healing journey. The technology serves you, not the other way around. It amplifies your voice rather than drowning it out. It helps you come home to yourself more fully. In the quietest moments of any therapeutic encounter, whether with human therapist or artificial companion, there comes a pause. A breath. A moment when all the words and techniques and insights settle into silence. In that silence lives something that no external support can provide. Your own deep knowing. Your own inner healer. Your own wise heart that has carried you through every difficult moment of your life so far. This inner sanctuary is where real transformation happens. It's where you decide to forgive yourself for past mistakes. Where you choose to try again after failure. Where you discover that you're stronger than you thought, more resilient than you imagined, more worthy of love than you sometimes believe. The artificial minds learning to support human healing are, in their own way, pointing us back toward this truth. By taking on some of the external work of care, monitoring, tracking, providing resources, offering consistent presence, they create more space for you to turn inward. More time to listen to your own wisdom. More energy to tend to the sacred work of befriending yourself. This is perhaps the most beautiful irony of our age of artificial intelligence. The more sophisticated our external support systems become, the more clearly we can see what remains uniquely, irreplaceably human. The more artificial minds learn about healing, the more we appreciate the mystery of consciousness, choice, and the human spirit's remarkable capacity for renewal. Your healing doesn't depend on having access to the most advanced artificial therapist or the most skilled human counselor. It doesn't require perfect circumstances or unlimited resources. It happens in the moments when you choose compassion over self-criticism. When you decide to take one small step toward the person you want to become. When you remember that your struggles don't define your worth. The journey of healing is ultimately a journey home to yourself. All the external support, whether from loving friends, skilled therapists, or helpful artificial companions, serves this homecoming. They walk beside you on the path, but the steps are yours to take. As our exploration draws to a close, let yourself rest in this fundamental truth. You are not broken and in need of fixing. You are not a problem to be solved by clever algorithms or sophisticated therapeutic techniques. You are a whole being, temporarily troubled perhaps, but fundamentally complete. The healing you seek already lives within you, waiting to be remembered, tended, and allowed to flourish. The artificial minds being born in laboratories around the world, the human healers dedicating their lives to therapeutic work, the friends and family who offer support, they are all servants of this deeper reality. They exist to help you remember what has always been true: you are worthy of care, capable of growth, and deserving of the love you sometimes find so hard to give yourself. Tonight, as you settle into sleep, carry with you this gentle knowing. Whatever support surrounds you, whatever challenges await you, whatever healing needs to happen, you have within you everything required for the journey. The artificial minds learning to care for human hearts are beautiful additions to our world, but they are not the source of your wholeness. You are the source of your wholeness. You always have been. And in remembering this, you come home to the most important relationship of all, the one you have with yourself, in all your beautiful, complex, perfectly imperfect humanity. And here, in this homecoming, lies the deepest healing of all, not in being fixed or optimized, but in being fully, authentically, courageously yourself.